Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. Here you will learn all things related to healing from divorce, mind, body, and spirit, so you can create a beautiful new life filled with happiness. I'm Rachel Ruby, author of Divorce to Bliss, divorce coach, speaker, and attorney, and I'm so glad you found me here. Hello and welcome to the Divorce to Bliss podcast. I'm Rachel Ruby. If you are watching on YouTube, will you please subscribe, turn on notifications, like, comment, and share so that I can continue to bring you fantastic information about your divorce healing process and amazing guests like the one we have today. We are going to be talking today about setting boundaries for healing. And this is so important to do when you are healing from divorce. My guest is Lauren LaSalle, and she is a boundary and self-care coach for highly sensitive people. And she does have a podcast called the Highly Sensitive Podcast. She also is a former therapist, and Lauren helps people to set boundaries in order to reclaim their time and their energy and be able to care for themselves. So she is the perfect person to talk to us today about boundary setting. Welcome, Lauren, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
As am I, yes. So boundary setting. I think that a lot of people maybe have heard of boundary setting, but don't really understand it. So can you just explain what that means?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like it is getting to be more of like a word that people hear nowadays. Like that's one of the keywords along with self-care. But so boundary setting is what you are willing to put up with, basically, kind of in a nutshell, how you would like people to treat you and how you would like to treat yourself too, in some instances. It also can go along with your values, what your values are. So a lot of people base their boundaries off of what matters to them. And we can get into that more in a little bit. But I just wanted to mention that too.
Yeah. So I think you're right. I think a lot of people are starting to realize self-care and boundary setting are necessary to protect their energy and be able to take care of themselves. And it's such a great tool to learn when healing. Why specifically within that healing process, and I focus on divorce healing, why is boundary setting so important?
Yeah. So when you're healing, you're more vulnerable, I think, to outside influence. And maybe you're healing from some sort of relationship or where you need to set boundaries around that relationship. So maybe you need to cut off communication with that person. Maybe you need to limit communication with that person in order to be able to work on yourself. Maybe you need to set boundaries with who you share information with about your healing process or what you've been through, because some people want to try to help you, but the information that they offer you may not actually be helpful for you. It might be just based on what they've been through.
Right. Yeah. That's so interesting because it sounds like boundary setting can involve many different facets, it can involve letting go or kind of temporarily letting go. And again, letting go is something a lot of people don't understand. And I've done podcasts on that too. And they think it just means like dropping someone from their lives, but there's so many different subparts to that, right? And like you kind of mentioned, just maybe temporarily, setting a boundary for someone and explaining it to them. So let's talk about getting started with boundary settings, and then we can kind of talk about maybe how it applies to different types of people who may be preventing you from healing. So if you have never really set boundaries before, or maybe you have in a different context, but now you're healing from this trauma, how do you go about setting those boundaries?
Yeah. So I think in some cases, the boundaries that need to be set aren't very obvious to us. Like maybe we're just sort of putting up with maybe how another person is treating us, and we don't quite feel right about it. We don't feel like we want to be around this person as much, but it doesn't it's not like so obvious. We just kind of feel it in our bodies. And I think in general, we're not taught to check in with our bodies and see how our bodies are reacting. So being able to really check in with your body. How does it feel when you are in this situation? How does your stomach feel? That's a big one for me, is feeling like an upset stomach or like knots in your stomach, or even just feeling, you do, even just feeling like kind of uncomfortable, like in your skin, can be a really good indication that a boundary needs to be set. Maybe it's just with something that the person just said to you doesn't sit right. Or maybe it's with the person in general, you feel like I really need to put some distance in between us. So checking in with your body is a great way. Sometimes the boundaries are obvious to us. Like we can just tell, like in the case of divorce, maybe I don't really want to be involved with this person anymore. So I definitely know that I need to set some boundaries here. I mean, getting a divorce, I think, is a huge boundary in of itself that you're setting. So, I mean, sometimes we have to really check in with ourselves. Sometimes we know if you are aware of what your values are, for example, like your family or your health, if you're healing, your general well-being, your health, physical health, mental health can be a huge value to you because that's something you want to focus on. So knowing that and knowing that you need to protect yourself from certain things, just to be general about it, is really important, especially, when you're doing some healing. So I feel like that was kind of like vague, but hopefully it was vague enough.
We'll get. No, it was great, and we'll get more specific into and talk about different people within that healing process. But what I love that you said, what I heard you say, was talking about two things. One is listening to yourself, and the other is trusting your intuition. Yes. So I think when people go through something like divorce, which is so traumatic, it is very easy to get sucked into that kind of victim mentality, so that you don't, you usually, even if you're a person who normally listened to yourself and trusted that intuition, sometimes we kind of forget that because we're in such this victim state and we're so sad, angry, whatever, insert adjective. But it's so easy for us to forget that that the heart is the most important thing. And if, like you said, if something doesn't feel right, and I so too have had those stomach jitters, those upset stomach, those, oh no, I just feel it in the pit of my stomach. And everyone's different. Some people have it in different places, but it's a reminder to first listen to yourself. Even if there's just this little nudge, just listen to it and explore it further. So that's great advice. If you're going to kind of, I think in a general perspective, let's say someone has a journal, which I highly recommend. Journaling is such a great tool. And I think one of the most important tools while you're going through the healing process, sounds like would be a really good tool to use also to write down what your expectations are from as pertains to different people, loved ones, people who are, giving you advice, things like that. And also what your expectations are with the former spouse, especially if you have children, because you most likely will be communicating with that person. So do you think that's a good idea to write down some ideas or rules or things that you want to get out of relationships with others so that you can set your boundaries?
Definitely. Yeah. Because then you've thought about it. You have it on paper so you can go back to it. So maybe you do overstep that boundary a little bit. Like if you are really angry with maybe something that your ex-spouse said, and you weren't going to speak to them, but you write this long text and then you go, oh my gosh, I should not have engaged in this. I shouldn't have done that. And now they're like calling me and all this. So if you write it down, you can remind yourself, this is what I've decided I want out of this relationship. This is how it's going to be. And it's much easier, I think, to not cross those boundaries, or to remind yourself to pull yourself back if you are in those situations. So journaling is awesome.
Yeah. It's very powerful to be able to set some standards as to how you want something to be. And I think the writing down and the listening and the trusting the intuition, all of those things really help one to feel empowered. And that is one of the greatest ways to get through the healing process, is to know you have control. Because I think in divorce, there's a feeling of having such or no control, such small levels of control or no control over the process and the feelings. And also one more thing that you mentioned, like when you talked about responding and not reacting. And that is so important, like with the text message example you gave. And I think if you do write it down, it's hopefully will remind you if you go back and read it, but also in the moment when somebody sends you, let's say, a heated text message, like, well, I'm not going to pick up the kids at that time because that's your time, or, and you're in the middle of work or you're doing something, and that just, you feel that in the pit of your stomach. Just take a breath, take a pause, get up, walk around, go outside, whatever you need to do before you reply. So you are responding and not reacting. Because when you come from a place of reacting, that can escalate it and make you feel worse. And that just, again, can make you just go into that victim mode where your healing kind of takes a break. So let's talk about setting boundaries with specific people. We kind of already mentioned the former spouse, but are there any tools that you would recommend aside from the journaling and, like I said, maybe take a little pause so you don't react? Are there any other tools that might help, especially for people who have children, and they are sharing the custody? Because I think that is one of the situations where couples really still have to communicate. So are there any tools that might help people with boundary setting in regards to the former spouse?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And I used to work with, I did therapy with kids, and a lot of them had divorced parents. So that was something that just happened to come up too. So I would say the number one thing from having that sort of lens is to think about your child and how your interactions with the other parent might affect your child. So sort of like put them first, because some parents, I think it's hard too, because like you were saying, you don't want to react. And sometimes it can be hard not to, but it can really affect the kids, and they can really pick up on that negative energy. And they're really good at picking up on what you are feeling about the other parent as well. So I'd say for that, like my number one thing is to think about how what you're saying and doing will affect your children. Yeah.
What about like, even, I just thought of this, like a little kind of self role playing where you can think of a situation where, let's say, the other parent calls in a text and says, I can't make it tonight. You're going to have to pick them up or something. And you kind of think of how you might respond to that situation beforehand. And obviously we can't come up with all of the situations, right, that might occur, but maybe we can come up with some responses for things like that when that person isn't showing up when they're supposed to. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Coming up with things ahead of time can definitely be helpful, because then even if you are feeling really angry or upset, you have this pre-written response that you can say to the other person. So you're not trying to think of an appropriate thing to say in the moment that might come out in a way that you don't want it to.
And it's so hard with the former spouse. So my children are adults, but when I was going through my divorce, I was getting a lot of messages that started off really nice, let's see if we can make this work type of thing, and then just got really disruptive. And so I had to learn how to set boundaries without, completely cutting my former spouse off or blocking him. And that's just kind of a trial and error thing. But I think it's with the kids, it's a lot more, you can focus on the kids, and without the kids involved, you can focus on yourself and just maybe make a list of the things that are so important to you in your journal, so that you can try to be present for those things and not let someone else, bring you down or steer you in another direction. What about, so this is a big one. People in our lives, like, our mother, family, our aunts, so family, people who love us, people within our support networks. I have another podcast on support networks where I talk about the fact that the people that love us and support us may not be the right people to be in our support networks at a particular time. And only we can evaluate that. And there's things we can do, whether letting go or I always say set boundaries first. But how can we set boundaries with, Aunt Sally, who wants to constantly tell us like, oh, you shouldn't do that. You should do this. Or the best friend that says, oh, my friend did the same thing. And this is what you need to do. Because I think within those parameters of divorce healing, you have to figure these things out for yourself. And you have to learn to make your own choices so you can become the new person, the new version of you, and create the new life. So how can we set boundaries with people who are just very vocal as to what we should or should not be doing?
Yeah. And I feel like it's really hard to set boundaries with people in your support network because it feels really uncomfortable. And you feel like, I don't want to alienate them, or I don't want them to not be in my support network anymore. So should I just keep having them give me their opinion about things? Just deal with it. But I think it is really important to be able to say, sometimes even just say, oh, thank you for your input. And then just know that you're not going to take it with you. Or to say, I really appreciate what you're sharing with me. I think I have my own ideas about this, or, something along those lines. You can even just decide that you are not going to share certain aspects of your life with them anymore, which really might be the best way to go about it. So that you can have the type of relationship with them that you still want. It's right. It's not, I like to think of boundaries as they're helping you. They're for you. I heard, I don't know who said it, but they're for you. It's not against the other person, which I think is really important to keep in mind, because sometimes it can feel like you're, I don't know, disappointing the other person, or you're hurting them in some way by not including them in this part of your life. But they're probably not even going to notice. They might not even notice that you're not talking about this part of your life anymore. So you really have to do things to protect yourself, to make your own decisions. So, yeah. I think you're right. I mean, sometimes you have to be you have to approach it very gingerly, because, obviously these people love you, but I think sometimes it's really hard for people, and I especially not to discriminate, but I especially find this, at least in my own case and in people I speak with, I find this to be true in older relatives, because, they love you and care about you so much, but they have a lot of wisdom. And so they want to, and whether or not they've been through divorce, it doesn't matter. They just want to make you feel better. So they're doing it. It's coming from here, but it's, again, I think that these decisions that you make within your healing process need to be your decisions. And, I've even told people that to say something to the effect of, hey, I love you so much, and your support means the world to me. This is the hardest thing I've ever been through, and I'm learning a lot about myself and what I need and what I want in the life I'm creating outside of that marriage, outside of that person that I was. And I need to make a lot of these decisions and discoveries on my own. And I love your input and your love. And I want to ask if you will be there for me when I need advice. And you will be, one of the first people I would come to for that advice, because I know how much you care about me. And so that way it's not just like you're cutting them off. It's not like you're holding back. Cause I know, for example, like certain people in my family can tell when I'm, I don't know, not feeling 100% positive, and they'll say, are you okay? And, and so you don't always want to share things with everyone, but I think that is kind of, what do you think from your, therapist perspective and coaching perspective? Is that a good way to kind of approach someone and just let them know that you do care, but hey, this is
something I need to do? And will you be there for me if I need you?
Right. Oh, absolutely. I think that's a really great way to say it, because it makes them still know that you still care about them and your relationship. And there are some things right now that you'd prefer not to discuss with them. But you're also saying that they'll still be there when you do need them. So I really like that way of saying it.
Yeah. And so you're telling them that you value them and you value what they're saying, but that right now you need to take a step back from everybody else's advice and learn to rely on your own and learn to listen to back again to the listening and the intuition. So I've coached some people who had issues with that, and I think that was really it seemed to work for them. So and it worked for me as well. But of course, there are always some people. I had to let a few friends go from my life, and it started out temporarily and explaining that, hey, I need to just take a break. But one of them became permanent, and it was very freeing for me, even though that person loved me and was there for me. And, so it really just depends on your situation. But let's talk about self boundaries, because this is another big one. How can we, how can we set boundaries for ourselves when we are healing? Because again, we need to make these decisions. We need to come to these conclusions. So what can we do? Yeah.
It's really hard to set boundaries with yourself. I mean, it's hard to set them with anybody, but with yourself, it's so easy to slip up and to just say, well, I was going to do that, but I decided not today, or, it's just this, it doesn't matter. But when you're healing, a lot of the things that you're doing really do matter. And it's important to know what you need to do to take care of yourself and to stick to it. So whether that's, sometimes that's just getting enough sleep in general, making sure that you go to bed at the same time every night, making sure that maybe you're going for a walk every day, making sure that you are getting to do activities that you enjoy and that bring you happiness. Maybe even it's making sure that you are going to therapy every week and not skipping out on an appointment because you just don't really feel like going. Because honestly, those are the times when you really should be going, is when you're like, whatever. Right. So again, journaling, you can write down your plan, or even in a planner, you can write that you are going to take a walk at this time, or going to have lunch with a friend, some way that you can sort of hold yourself accountable for those. And I think if you do sort of slip up or decide whatever, don't hold that against yourself, because just give yourself some self-compassion and know that I'm human and this is going to happen. And from now on, I'm just going to keep doing the best that I can to take care of myself. Because it is hard. And I think especially when you're healing, sometimes you can feel discouraged and feel like, I've been doing all that I know to take care of myself, and I'm still feeling like this. So self-compassion is a huge thing too.
Yeah. I love that. You talked about so many great things that I'd share as well. Getting outside, getting in nature, movement of the body, self-care, doing nice things for yourself, and being with others, and not just, and doing fun things with others, and not just sitting around and moping or staying in your house, and going to, keeping your therapy or your coaching appointments or whatever, however you energy heal, whatever you choose to help you with, if that is within your wheelhouse. And all of those things are wonderful. Also, eating healthy, abstaining from, mind altering drugs and drinking and things like that, because that keeps you more positive. And I love the sleeping one. That's huge. So I think, yes, setting these patterns to do these important things, all of those things are a huge part of healing and will enable you, it sounds like, to set boundaries and know what those boundaries are that you want to see. So that's fantastic. Is there anything else? Oh, here's one. What do you do with someone? We kind of already alluded to this, but if you have set boundaries with someone and that person ends up not respecting those boundaries, What are the next steps, or what can you say?
Yeah. So if they are arguing with you in the moment when you're trying to set that boundary, just keep repeating it. Try to remain calm. Take a deep breath. If you argue with them, then it's going to go nowhere. So all you can really do is just try to repeat the boundary, remain calm, like I said. And if they're still not listening to it, I mean, you can't control other people. You can only control yourself. So sometimes you have to limit your interactions with that person. Sometimes you maybe have to just remove that person from your life. I mean, I think that can be really hard, especially if it's someone that you really care about. But if they are not respecting your boundaries, then they're not really respecting you as a person. And you kind of have to think about, like, do I want to put up with this? Do I want this person to remain in my life if I just feel horrible every time I'm interacting with them? So yeah, sometimes it does have to go that far.
Yeah. And so again, I mean, that's just the whole process of letting go. And it can either be it can start out as a temporary thing. And I think for many people, it's easier to tell someone that, hey, I need to just take a break from getting advice from people for a while. So I'm just going to, do my healing work, and I'll touch base with you soon, and that kind of thing. And then after you do that, it's a huge and wonderful exercise to, even on a daily basis, or you can check in with yourself whenever, once a week, to notice how you feel having let that person go, even if it was temporarily. And for me, that was a game changer with one particular person, who loved me so much. And I loved this person so much, but until I let that person go, it didn't occur to me that I would feel so freed. Just amazing. So I think it's important to check in with yourself. And as you go through the healing process, you might want that person to come back into your life at some point, and you can reach back out. So,
Yeah, that's the great thing about boundaries, is that they can change. And I also like to tell people, if somebody's not used to you setting boundaries, there likely will be some pushback, or they're just sort of confused. Like, where is this coming from? You've always been fine with this. Why are you suddenly not fine with this? So sometimes, in some cases, people just need time to get used to the fact that you're starting to set boundaries, and maybe they're probably not pushing back because they don't respect you. It's just because they're like, what is this? Now I have to change things too. So sometimes they just need to get used to it. And I think you can probably sense the difference if someone's just outright disrespecting your boundaries, or if they're kind of like, okay, why? So again, checking in with your body.
Great point. Yeah, that is a great point. And I didn't think about that, but that is a great point, because the intention might not be to, boss you around and tell you what to do. The intention just might be just coming from all this love, and maybe in the past there's always been that advice giving and acceptance type of thing. And so now all of a sudden, there may not be, and that might be hard for that other person to understand. Like, why is she or he suddenly not listening to me? I give great advice. And, so that's really, and again, I think it's, there are three things that are important. It's the listening to yourself, the trusting of the intuition, and the speaking your truth to the person. And, however you decide to do that, however you think you need to, if you need to cushion that, if you need to make it, think the person's going to be like a highly sensitive person, for example, it might be really hurt. Even if you say something nicely, like, hey, I need to kind of take a little break because I'm trying to figure this out and I want to figure it out on my own. They might take that personally, right? So you really have to trust yourself, listen to yourself, knowing that person, figure out what would be the best way to use my words. But again, like you said, you can't control other people. So whether someone's going to be hurt or not by what you say, that shouldn't stop you from speaking your truth. Right?
Yeah. I think it's so easy for us to think, oh, but if I say this to them, they're probably going to be upset. And I don't want to hurt their feelings, so I'm just not going to say it. But then if you don't set that boundary, how are you going to feel? not great. I mean, so I always tell clients to remind yourself about why you're setting the boundary in the first place, and to think about what would happen or what has happened when you haven't said it. Because chances are you probably aren't feeling happy with whatever's going on. Maybe it's something that's really draining your energy. Maybe you feel like it's taking up all of your time that you want to be using for something else. So think about what is going to continue happening, or what will happen if you don't set that boundary. Because when we're too focused on the other person, it's really easy to just want to be there for them and sort of forget about ourselves. So, and of course, it's so hard to focus on just yourself sometimes too, especially I think for women, we're usually like the caregiver and we're supposed to be there for everybody, but you can't be there for everybody and not be there for yourself. So that's
the golden rule. The golden rule. I love those words. Yes, so true. Oh my gosh, I think that is the best sentence in this whole podcast, and that's really, and you nailed it when you said, especially for women, and that again, like as the caregivers, as the ones who want to be there for people, it's hard for us to say, hey, stop. I'm going to put me first. I love that, and. On that note, is there anything else that you would like to add about boundary setting that might be important?
Let's see. Well, I think one thing that can help is to write down, maybe again, journaling, some like positive affirmations or mantras that you have about either setting boundaries or taking care of yourself or healing, or, all three. And just look at them or say them to yourself daily, because sometimes we have so many negative thoughts that just pop up. And then it can be hard to actually go through with setting the boundary or helping yourself heal. So sort of finding some sentences that are the opposite of those thoughts can be really helpful and sort of like rewire your thinking patterns, and just help you be able to be there for yourself and to have compassion for yourself and take care of yourself.
Great advice. I talk about that a lot as well. And then, and also saying them as you look into your own eyes in the mirror, and just, that's a big part. I think, also, I mean, you don't have to do that all the time, but I absolutely love that idea of having some affirmations that instill positivity, like you said, because you can wake up in this great positive mood and not expecting something to happen that's going to bring you down a little bit. And then it's so easy to just slip into that, I'm just going to sit on the couch and eat a pint of ice cream because I had a really bad day. It's easy. It's so easy. I mean, but the hard part of the healing work, and that's why we call it work, right? Is being able to push past that and go, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to turn on the music and dance, and I'm going to, and just to learn how to not let those things affect you, and they will affect you. And that's part of being human. But yes, I love the affirmations. I love that. And it really can help. So many great ideas. Thank you so much for chatting with me. And for those who are watching on YouTube, we will put this on the screen. And for those who are listening, Lauren, can you share the best contact information for you and your podcast?
Yeah. So my podcast is the Highly Sensitive Podcast. You can find it pretty much anywhere. My website is laurenlasallecoaching.com, and you can find links to my social media, podcast, coaching information on there. I'm also on Instagram at Boundaries by Lauren. You can get in touch with me that way. So that's pretty much it, I think. I'm on Facebook too, but you can just search for me and you'll probably find me.
Yeah, and I'm sure your website has connections to all of those places, correct?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much for being with us. This is such an important part of healing, and I really appreciate you and all your great ideas. So hopefully we can chat again soon one day.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.